Good morning. We got a Husqvarna 128 CD unit here. This unit you can change out and put different attachments. Came in with a curved shaft trimmer on it. Get a lot of these. Most of them less than 5-6 months old with carburetor problems. So we've got to where we don't even go through these carbs. They're just so cheap. We order a kit. I'll post that part number in somewhere. It comes with a gasket. I guess that's going to depend on where you get them. I bought this one straight from Husqvarna. So I'm going to show you today how to take that off and put the new one on. So to do that, we're going to have to remove this cover. I'm going to start with this simple turn knob to remove the air filter cover where we can access those bolts. Air filter doesn't look too bad. I like to go ahead and change them while we're in there putting a new carb on. Anytime I change a carb, I don't care how good they say the fuel is or how good it looks. I empty the fuel, check the fuel line. I put fresh fuel into that unit. Suggest to the customer to dump their fuel just to be sure. And I put a new air filter in it. So to remove this, we're going to remove these two nuts. To do that, we'll use a 5/16 nut driver, socket, whatever you have. And then we'll pull this choke lever around halfway just to give us some room to play, and that'll slide off. Now our carburetor is exposed. We have to unhook our throttle linkage. I just find that a lot of times if you'll grab that throttle and pull it back, it'll allow you enough slack that you can temp that up and pull it out. Just be careful that you don't crimp that or break that right behind that. Then we're going to disconnect these two fuel lines. You need to pay attention which way those are hooked up because you'll be needing to put them back the same way. Now, if you're going to replace those lines, you can just cut them and then worry about getting it off once you pull your carb off. This little carrier is what guides your throttle cable. It'll just simply pull out the way and remove your new gasket. You want to inspect that, and like all of that extra gasket material that's left over anywhere, you want to make sure and get that off. Now that is plastic, so don't get in there and just go to gouging on it. You'll notice the little raises that's on it. You don't want to take those off. Depending on the unit and where it's at, you may want to, what I do, I generally try to make sure my piston is pulled up to block that port, so that if anything falls into it, I can blow it out. You could stick a rag or something of that nature into it to keep anything from falling in it, but with that piston there, it can't go any further, and I'll blow it out when I'm done. Got our new parts laid out here, which is our new carburetor. On this particular unit is an H228-1. They give us a new gasket, and I don't know on others, but from Husqvarna, especially for a homeowner that doesn't have a lot of experience, they actually give you directions on how to set that carb once you get it installed. So if you're not familiar with setting them, I strongly suggest you read that in case you do need to tweak it. So we've got all of our gasket material off. We'll blow out that area, make sure there's no trash, and visually look down into that cylinder through the carb intake. Make sure there's no trash in there. Talk to you a minute about gaskets. This particular carb came with a gasket. I get people all the time that come in and buy a carburetor because they want to replace their own. I try to sell them a gasket for ones that don't come with it, and they don't want to buy one. Most gaskets only cost a few dollars. Could you reuse that gasket? Yeah, you may be all right. But considering the cost of a gasket, why take the chance? So if you go get a carburetor, he's got a gasket, buy a gasket. All right, so we've removed all of our gasket material. We've inspected inside of our cylinder to make sure we don't have any of that left in it. So we're ready to go back with the new carb. So to do that, first thing we'll do is install the new gasket. Now on this machine, there's so many variations that you can't hardly mess it up, but on most machines, I would suggest you keep the old gasket because you can look at the imprint on it and make sure that you're putting them back the right way. Pull your cable and your carrier out of the way. Pull your fuel lines down and slide the new gasket up on your studs and gently push it back. Make sure that you're not tearing that gasket and forcing that gasket on them studs. Once you have that on, you'll take your new carb, make sure and keep those fuel lines pulled out of the way. Slide it into place. Put your throttle cable carrier back on to your nipple. You may have to pull that carb out a little bit and then push it back. Then we'll pull our throttle cable or throttle lever over so that we can allow ourselves some slack. Take your needle nose, grab your throttle cable, and manipulate that tit back in. Now we need to reconnect our fuel lines. Remember, we had talked about making sure which way they went and that you put them back the right way. If you're using regular needle nose, just be gentle that you don't tear those fuel lines. Then we'll install our other one. Making sure it's fully seated. Next, we'll reinstall our cover back on the unit. Make sure that there's no sand in there. This particular unit, according to the drawing, there's no gasket in between it. I guess it just seats to the plastic. Line it up on the studs. Push it home. When you go to reinstall these nuts, I like to put both of them on and just put them down till they touch. I've seen a lot of cases where these come in and they've been previously worked on, whether it be by the homeowner or whatever, and they've tightened them down to the point they've distorted the plastic. They don't need to be that tight. I like to tighten them down till they just touch, and then I'll take each one about a quarter to a half, and by doing that, you don't pinch those gaskets. I guess I kind of learned that. I originally was a pipe fitter after I graduated high school, so I learned about gaskets. If that air filter box is dirty, you need to clean that box before you put your new filter in, and then replace your cover. When I install a new carb on a unit, I like to go ahead too and change that filter. Make sure that tank's clean. Then we know that we have a good fuel filter. And there may not be anything wrong with the other one, but what we do know is that our unit had some kind of fuel issue. Also use a lot of these 610 381. This unit today, we're going to go with this 610 381. I purchased these from Stens. And then we'll just tuck that back down into the tank. Oh, just seen something there. I want to show that to you. Can you see that? That's a brand new filter right out of the pack that's cracked. So it always pays to inspect your parts, even if they are new. So because of that, I'm out of those filters. I'm going to use this bigger filter. It's not going to hurt anything. I have used these before. I like to use the smaller ones in these units, but it is what it is. Put that down in there and make sure it doesn't kink up. So all that's left to do now is let's put some fuel in this bad boy and see if it'll crank. That's what I tend to use. Let's get over here and see if we've made any success. We'll hit that primer bulb a few times and get some fuel in it. Choke it. Do it a half choke. You see that unit is smoking. This particular unit had a lot of excess fuel in the muffler. If you see it smoking when you first crank it up, give it just a second and watch it. It may be that extra fuel or oil from that bad carb that it had deposited into that exhaust. So that pretty much sums up how to change the carburetor on a Husqvarna 128 CD. With the proper tools and everything laid out, that should be about a 10 or 15 minute job. If you're inexperienced, don't rush and try to meet that 10 or 15 minutes. Take your time and do it right. I appreciate y'all joining me, and I'll see you here next time.